Please leave a message after the tone.
Angela, it's me. Okay, I'm looking at the calendar. March 2026. For this new FinCEN rule, it feels like it's right around the corner. I just read the Ulta briefs again. 111 data points? We have to build a whole new workflow. Asking clients for passport numbers? How are we supposed to get all this ready in time and keep closings smooth? I'm already overwhelmed. You always know this stuff. What's the first step?
Hello, welcome to Pick Up, podcast hosted by Capital Bank. My name's JJ Kaye. I'm the CMO here at Capital Bank. And today I'm joined by some really exciting guests. I have Angela, is it Saiz or?
Saiz.
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 Saiz. I didn't know, is the Z just always with like a TH or?
Only in Spain.
Only in Spain.
Correct.
Okay.
Like Ibiza.
Ibiza. Well, yeah. I'm never going to forget that now.
Right.
So Angela Saiz, she's our SVP of Fiduciary Banking for Capital Bank. And I'm also joined by Elizabeth Berg. She is the Vice President of Education and Training for Fidelity National Financial. So today, as you probably heard at the intro, this is the FinCEN Freakout call. And we're gonna get into a little bit about why it's the FinCEN Freakout. And just to kind of set the table a little bit. So today we're going to be talking about a major change that's impacting settlement agents across the nation. This is a change that traces back to Pablo Escobar and the Miami Vice era of the 1980s. So it's meant to counteract money laundering and nefarious actors, but it's causing quite the stir for settlement agents. And so this is, hence the, FinCEN Freakout and dealing with all cash purchases. So, I think this is the right mix of, major regulatory changes. So I do want to get into this, right? Because I think it's a little bit of the elephant in the room right now. So there was, when we talked about a couple things, FinCEN, and again, for all of our listeners who aren't versed, that's the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, a very terrifying acronym. But I think if anyone who's worked in banking is like, hey, this is just part of doing the job. Like this is just an entity that we interact with. But this is, and I wrote this down so I could get it right. It's the Anti-Money Laundering Regulations for Residential Real Estate Transfers. Do I have that right, Elizabeth?
That is the name of the regulation. Absolutely.
And that's a mouthful. And maybe just kind of at a high level, you could just sort of encapsulate. So what is this that everyone's kind of freaking out about?
Right. And so, I don't like using the term freaking out.
Oh, because those are my words. Words.
I know. Because at the end of the day, it's a lot and it's a regulatory burden, but it's data collection. So banks already have suspicious activity report obligations. And now, going back to 1988 and Nancy Reagan, we had this law in place, and now it's the settlement agent's turn. And it's collecting on cash transactions or where there's a lender without an anti-money laundering program that are residential to entities or trusts. We just have to gather some information, review it at a high level to make sure there isn't anything in our possession that would contradict what the buyer or seller told us. And then we file data with the federal government on the Bank Secrecy Act e-filing, BSA e-filing website. So there's a lot to it, absolutely, but it's data gathering at the end of the day. And, when we talk about this and dig into the rule and educate, Angela probably saw me on a panel with 3 other people last Friday for an hour and a half. When we sit down with the rule and dig into it, it's data collection, which we can do. And which, Capital Bank, have you guys been doing this and SARS reporting for a while?
Yes.
Yes.
Absolutely. Beneficial ownership. It's all relevant to what we already do. You're absolutely correct. And I think that you're right. It is data collection, but for me, I think it's the key point is the communication of the data collection and being able to communicate it not only with the buyers and the sellers, but also with their partners, with the realtors, with their loan officers, just so that they're aware early on.
I couldn't agree more. And I'm so glad that Capital Bank is doing this podcast so that we can talk about the importance of getting to our realtor community, getting to our investor clients, maybe some are Capital Bank clients, and having that conversation about preparation and what's coming. Because the last thing we want is someone to be at the closing table and not know about this rule. So if you're listening to this and you're in the settlement sphere, this is a great opportunity. We're just going to have a conversation today. Send this to your realtors. Send this to your investor clients so that they get comfortable with the terminology also. Again, it's data collection. So the more that we dig in and we have a conversation about it, the less fearful it is. And that's the biggest thing too. The more that we're actually getting in front of our customers and telling them what to expect. Because yeah, absolutely, there's some information that's a little bit detailed and that our buyers might have to consult with someone on, but we're going to have to do it. Anytime I do trainings in person, I was in Ohio yesterday. I'm doing this podcast today. I'm going to Vermont and Connecticut this week. But the more we talk about it, right? And yeah, I get the freak out because it's always the fear of unknown, right? Right? We freak out when it's like, ah! And then when we dig in a little bit, we're like, oh, wait, I know how to do this. I can do this. I can do this. But it's always change, right?
So I know that, when we spoke about this kind of in our pre-production meeting, there was the notion that this law was really only impacting purchases in certain cities, right? I think it was like New York, LA, which city?
It originally started out with geographic targeting in terms of cities that had a higher than normal, cash purchase. And then, the government through the data realized that there were a lot of those transactions actually had people that had already had SARS, suspicious activity reports, listed. And I can't remember the percentage. I want to say it was fairly high. Elizabeth, do you know what it?
Yep, I know off the top of my head. So for those listeners that don't know, Capital Bank and other banks already have reporting obligations under suspicious activity reports where they have a whole procedure that goes, something spunky monkey here is what I like to call it. And they are under an obligation to report and not tell the person that reporting. So under the geographic targeting orders that are in 69 counties currently, the data that was submitted to the government, 42% of those names that were submitted as beneficial owners of these entities actually correlated to a SARS report. And then 7%, and this is government data that was submitted to Congress, 7% were under FBI investigation already, which, when we talk about wire fraud and, how hard it is to get the FBI to investigate just because of staffing and not enough people and time, et cetera, that's kind of wild that 7% of the names were under FBI investigation because they don't do that lightly. So yeah, those are the exact statistics.
And so I would imagine that people probably are not aware when they're making like a home purchase, right? Mm-hmm. And I think they're probably not thinking about how home purchasing is a vehicle for money laundering, right? And how a lot of this law is really designed to keep us safe, right? Because at the end of the day, we don't want bad actors to utilize U.S. assets and launder money back to their country. And so while this is probably seems like it is a regulatory burden, but look, that's the price we pay. But it is somewhat the price for safety. I mean, is that kind of like what you're hearing in your sphere?
That's the communication when we're also onboarding. Whether the regulation is too broad or we can get it narrowed down through advocacy efforts, through American Land Title Association is one thing. But when we're thinking about the overall purpose of this, absolutely. Angela and I were just in New York City last week. I could see Freedom Tower from my room, which, is over the site of the World Trade Center. Part of what what they're trying to do is literally stop the money laundering, which funds terrorists, which funds human trafficking, which funds individuals that, exploit children, right? So it's a good thing that FinCEN's trying to do at the end of the day, and getting that information to law enforcement, to Homeland Security, to Interpol, to all of these groups to try to stop the bad actors, not only in the United States, talk about drug cartels also, fentanyl, all of that, but worldwide. It is a noble cause what they're trying to do with
Right.
the
And
data.
I agree completely. And there's also the piece that this really just brings us up on level with our peer groups, in terms of G7, other countries are already doing this. And so it's a matter of us aligning with the rest of the world, so to speak.
And that's really the conversation also for your settlement agents that are, listening to this podcast. Share this with your realtors. Again, this is why they're asking for this information. It's to try to stop the bad actors. And a lot of the communications when we're thinking about how we communicate with our realtors or when this rule starts to be implemented, tell them the why. This is why FinCEN wants this data. I don't think anyone's going to disagree with a settlement agent that this is a good thing to stop the bad actors that are using residential real estate to launder money. Yeah.
So I know we've been really focused on you said it was 69 counties. Did I get that number right? Where the law has been geographically focused, but now this is expanding to the entire US. And I think what was a striking number to me when we were first talking about this is that a third of all home sales in the US are cash.
Mhm.
And that, Elizabeth, you were mentioning a couple of factors that are also going to be causing maybe a flood of cash purchases into the market. Do you want to kind of talk about kind of what's coming next? And also, I think you were referring to some of the retirees and also some of the industries that deal heavily in cash in parts of the country.
Right. Oh, yeah. We know this in our industry, right? And I'm not an economist at all. But the economists and the folks that are looking at the real estate market, in the next 5-10 years, there's about $6 trillion of wealth that's going to be transferred. There is a lot of cash in certain generations right now. Okay. And that's okay. It happens all the time. There's going to be a lot of cash transactions. We still see a lot of, with the different price points and whatnot, a lot, even when you look at the cash deals, it's a lot of investor communities also that are doing the flips, doing those deals also. That's cash, right? In general, yeah, it's easier to do a cash transaction. It closes a little quicker and all of that. But with this new regulation coming into place, those transactions, there could be a lot more data that has to be gathered and then provided to the government. Again, it can be done. It can be done. But that's where our realtors community really needs to think about their forms and what needs to be provided prior to closing. So yeah, cash still is going to be a major player in all of our real estate transactions. But everyone that is in here needs to know that this regulation could affect how that works a little bit. Yeah,
And
Angela?
when you're speaking of investors, the majority of investors they are making cash purchases and they are entities generally. They are LLCs. And so we have to consider that as well. And, investors are people that our agents seek out. They want their business, right? And so I look at this also as business development. This is an opportunity for them to reach out to their investor community to just let them know that, hey, we're aware, we're on top of this, we're being proactive, and we'd love to handle your deals because we're going to make sure that everything gets reported correctly and that you're able to close.
Mm-hmm. And when our settlement agents are talking to their investor communities, I know this. I used to be an underwriter, right? Our investors a lot of times do different deals with LLCs and different ownership, and they have different groups. Every single one of these transactions, they're going to have to provide information to that settlement agent to confirm who is in control of that entity and who has the different ownerships. This isn't a situation, settlement agents, my friends, this is not a situation where it's going to be the same all the time. We know that with our investors is why we get resolutions. So really having those conversations, we're getting ready for the holiday party season. I can give you 5 different things you can have to talk about at a cocktail reception that relates to FinCEN if you really want. But having those conversations about how this is going to work and how you have to have those certifications and the data for every single transaction is going to be important.
So Angela, I know you're constantly talking to all these parties, right? And I think when settlement agents hear 111 data points, federal reporting, they probably get a little nervous. And so I love Elizabeth, what you'd said about, look, this is just data collection. I think this is something that you've reinforced. Like, maybe you can kind of break down like what this looks like day to day. And obviously I kind of throw this question out to the both of you, like help kind of boil it down to sort of the simplest points.
Sure. I mean, I think the first piece of this is that they need to communicate, and it's really not, they're collecting the data, but the buyer needs to provide this data, right? This isn't something, that I think that if they're communicating it early on, the very beginning of the transaction, that just so you are aware, here is the new requirement, and you need to provide this information to us. And so I think it's a matter of just them building their process, their workflow, making sure that everyone is aware within their organization. So at the end of the day, it is their responsibility to collect the data and report it, but it is the buyer's responsibility to make sure that the settlement agent has what they need in order to report.
Yeah, and I completely agree with that, because the tricky part of this is, and why FinCEN is having settlement agents gather this data, the beneficial ownership information, you can't Google it, right? When we were just talking about the investors, they own different ownership parts. That's in their corporate records. That's not filed with your Secretary of State. When we're talking about who's in control of the company, that can change depending on the day or who's in charge. That is not the Secretary of State's office. When we're talking about someone's trust, because we really haven't touched on the trusts, those are generally private documents that can be really long and gnarly. Who is in control of the money or the assets or has the ability to extinguish the trust, right? That's within that document. That has to be answered by the buyer. We can't Google it. If we could Google it, FinCEN could Google it. If FinCEN could Google it and surface the information, they wouldn't be asking us to do it, right? So that's where we have to have that conversation. It's not, because it's always, well, why do we have to do it? Well, here it is.
Speaking of trust, because you're right, we hadn't touched on that. And I feel that where we are right now, so many more people are establishing trust. And it's through all of the different websites and the wills and trusts. And I can't think of all of them, but I feel like I see an ad every day.
Sort of like LegalZoom.
Right.
You just set
all
up
of
a will
those.
and trust.
It's much more accessible to many more
Everyday people.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I feel that, we're seeing more of those. I sold a home in January and it was an all cash deal.
Yeah.
And so in fact, and it was a trust.
Mm-hmm.
It was a couple and they had a trust, and so if it were March 1st, that title company would have had to collect this data.
And I think my takeaway from, if I'm going to just distill this down, the why, right? I think why settlement agents are like, well, why do I have to do this? Why do I have to find this information? And what I'm hearing is like, because this is not public information. That's kind of the big chain. Like if it was public, sure, we could go Google it. We could pull it from a database. Somebody could build a fancy API connection and just zip it right in. But at the end of the day, because, we are dealing with people's private entities, whether it's LLCs or trusts, this information is not publicly listed. So they got to go talk to someone, talk to their CPA, talk to their attorney. pull it out of a file somewhere, make sure it's up to date. So that of course there's an additional step, but that's just because there's a little bit more complexity in the buyers and how they have these their entities set up.
Yeah, and honestly too, because this is where I talk, because we always talk about objections, right? Angela, you're in sales. We always talk about objections. Like, what's the objection to using Capital Bank? We're going to have objections where people are saying, well, I don't want to do this. Well, it's also a choice that these individuals have made to protect their assets in an entity, or that's the tax structure they like, or with a trust, to think about their family long term. It's a choice to use an entity or trust. You don't have to. If you want to, right, Angela? You don't have
Right.
to. There is
Right.
nothing in the law that I know of that says you have to own your residential real estate in an entity or a trust. So, settlement agents, my friends, you are going to get objectors. It was their choice to do this, and they're using this for the benefit. So yeah, JJ, there could be questions that someone doesn't exactly know about their trust, or they don't know exactly about their entity, who controls and who owns it. They just have to ask their CPA, their accountant, or their attorney if they don't know. And honestly, some of the questions we're already going to have to ask. When someone is signing a deed and a settlement statement, we need to know who has authority, right? A lot of transactions, we already asked those questions. We have to make sure we have the right person. If it was a mortgage, which is not applicable in this situation, we want to make sure that Capital Bank, is protected and in first lien position, right? In those situations, you got to make sure you have the right person in front of you. So it's just adding a little bit more complexity, but it's something that can be asked. They should know or be able to get these answers.
I think the other piece of this too is that it actually shows the relevancy of our industry and how important we are, because it's just a way of solidifying our worth, and that we are relevant. I guess that's where I'll leave it. I don't want to go on to another subject that we could talk about,
Yes.
but I think that it shows how important we are for real estate transactions as an industry.
Well, we had our another pod that we recorded yesterday, and one of the things that came up in that is like having this team of advisors around you. So no matter what industry you're in, or even whether or not it's it's a private I'm making a personal transaction. I'm not a business owner. I'm just an individual. Like having that circle of trust where they can be strong advisors, they can help you navigate this. And to your point, like someone like you, someone like Elizabeth, that can help. You've already, if I'm putting myself in the shoes of the buyer, you've already made the good decision of kind of setting you and your family up for success, right? Establishing a trust, creating financial longevity, ensuring that the next generation is protected. Well, that comes with that additional complexity comes with a little bit of a cost, and that requires like having smart people around you to continue to navigate that as regulations change, as times change, and all that. So to me, that's just good hygiene when it comes to being a smart consumer, I guess.
Well, and here's the thing too, and we know this, right? Anytime there's change, anytime there's something new, it's going to be a little bit wild. But I think about, trusts I've seen set up, and the documents that we prep ahead of time, like certificates of trust as attorneys, or, powers of attorney, when we're anticipating someone is going to be doing a real property transaction, right? I anticipate the attorneys once we develop the processes to gather the data, the attorneys that are in this arena, the accountants that are in this arena are going to prep documents. Another piece of document says, hey, if you're going to buy property, these are going to be some of the answers ahead of time that you're going to have to provide. When we're talking about just the simple LLCs, the simple corporations that might be set up where they're not changing things in and out, or, the family trust situations, I expect the bar to create another document that's going to aid people. So they're not starting over from scratch. They'll know, okay, these are going to be the questions that we're going to get for this regulation. Be prepared. Because I've sat through a lot of trust and will signings where we're like, hey, these are your documents. Oh, in the future, you're going to get this question. Call me. But it's going to be this document. Just get ready. So, yeah, it's just anytime there's change or something new that we have to deal with, we can do it. It's just new. Yeah.
So I think we've talked. I think we maybe beat this horse to death a little bit. I mean, this is part of like freaking out, right? You're like like you're running around with your hair on if you have hair. Not everyone does, and you know you're freaking out, and then you're like, okay, take some deep breaths. You do some educate. You learn a little bit. Hopefully, listen to the pod, and then you're like, okay, what do I need to do next, right? And so I think as we get to like, how does the rubber meet the road here, right? Like Elizabeth, I think, when we first spoke, you sort of talked about, and I love, this is like my love language, breaking something down into like 3 simple steps. What are the 3 simple steps to just kind of take control of this situation?
Well, one, get some education on it, just to figure out what has to be collected, thinking about your processes, and then you've got that nugget. Then what I want everyone to do, man, last week, Angela, how many vendors did you see in the settlement arena and title production software, escrow software that are developing solutions to help folks gather the data, look at it for reasonable reliance purposes, and then get it to the government, right?
So at least 10. I
Yeah.
feel like I saw it was
Yeah.
so many existing vendors are developing services as well. But I pretty certain it was in the double digits. I should have counted.
I think you're about right. So there's at least 10 vendors in this arena, not to mention title production software. Okay. So you're going to get education. You're going to figure out your system, how you're going to collect the data. And then you're going to go out and have a conversation with your investors and your realtor clients, right? We need to do that anyway, right? Angela is great at sales and talking with folks. Settlement agents. This is a topic. We could give you the 5 things you can go out and talk about over the next 6 to 7 weeks, just in this rule alone. And that's where it is. It's the communication. It's getting out there and saying, this is coming. I understand that there was a government shutdown and other things at play and a lot of advocacy at the Alta level and some other things that happened. But this is coming March 1st, 2026. Yeah, we've got to get ready. And have those conversations. Because the last thing, settlement agents, the last thing that anyone wants is, one, we always hate it when someone switches from an individual to an entity or trust at the last minute at our closing table. Always hate that. But the last thing you want is a good client, a good funnel of business sitting down at your table and they know nothing about this regulation. And you go, yeah, I have to collect 111 data points and I'm not going to be able to close your transaction today. And they go, I don't even know what you're talking about, right? We never want to put our customer in that situation. Never.
I think that the timing is actually wonderful. And that's why, what the American Land Title Association, in terms of pushing the date out has done is created time for the industry, us to change and take a look at our processes, start talking about this. I think about having just a toolkit, like Elizabeth says, the 5 key data, here's what you can say, kind of a talk track. I think it's a great opportunity. I have always felt that anytime you can get in front of a client is time well spent. It's just being able to show that you are their trusted advisor. Traditionally, we slow down a little in our industry during those winter months. There aren't as many real estate transactions. So the timing really allows everyone to be a lot more proactive. And I think about the 5 Ps and, proper planning prevents poor performance. And there are 6, but I will leave that one out. So, it's about being able to just really take this time to reach out to your industry partners and, start to develop a plan.
Was, when we spoke previously, sort of the silver lining in this, a couple things. Like, one, this is a business development opportunity, right? Like, what better way to bring knowledge to your clients or potential clients, people that maybe you've been trying to get in front of, but they haven't been responsive. Like, this is great. Forward them the pod. The other thing that I'm hearing is, look, if things are a little slower, it's the perfect time to get your house in order, right? This is the perfect time to kind of build that workflow. And I think maybe either Elizabeth or Angela, you could kind of talk a little bit like, what does that look like? What does a good workflow look like? Maybe, I don't know if folks are always thinking that way. Like, help kind of just talk about some of the nuts and bolts of that.
I was going to let Elizabeth take that one,
Oh,
but
okay.
I can add to it, or did you want to?
No, my first half of the year was teaching workflow on this rule, and my second half, now that we have the final rule, or not the final rule, but what it's going to look like, has been literally nuts and bolts. Yeah. So one, the workflow is we get out now and tell people about it. But the question is really, at order entry, are you flagging residential transactions to entities or trusts, and telling them about it immediately? When we send out, it's just like the welcome. Anytime there's a settlement agent, you have a customer coming to your office. We always have to remember, even though we do this day in and day out, our customers, the consumer, does not do this, right? All the time. So those welcome letters where we're saying, hey, we're going to be your trusted partner. We're going to close your transaction. Oh, and if you're an entity or a trust buying, we're going to collect information from you. If you're the seller and the buyer's an entity or a trust, we're also going to collect information from you. It's going to be done this method, how it is done securely, because FYI, we're going to be asking you for a lot of non-public information that the whole world has been telling you not to provide to people, right? Social security numbers, passport numbers, your bank account information. Holy smokes, we're going to have to ask for it. And it's to stop terrorism, right? So having that at order entry in your processors early on to really tell them we need this information before closing because we have to file it with the government. And then also thinking about the process, right? When I teach on the workflow, I always want people to identify, I do it in this order. Is it a residential transaction according to FinCEN? Is it a cash transaction or a lender without an AML program? And then the third one is it an individual or an entity or trust? And that's because every settlement agent that's listening to this knows we always have the last minute. Someone says, no, I'm going to put it into an entity or trust. So in the workflow, you always have someone, whether you're a team of 3 or a team of 2,000, someone is always reaching out to the parties, the week before or a few days ahead of that closing and saying, hi, here are your documents. This is where our office is located. Or we're going to do a remote online notarization. This is how we're going to close. That's a great opportunity also to say, I just want to confirm the buyer is going to be an individual and not an entity or a trust. Please acknowledge, right? Yes, it would be better at order entry if we knew and no one ever changed their mind. I live in reality. People change their minds all the time. But we've got to get that information ahead of time, and having that in the workflow and in the conversation pieces, and then having someone audit the files to make sure ahead of closing that you have the information that you need. In that sort of process, you do the closing. And then you're on the back end making sure that in those situations where it is reportable, and you have the data, that it's actually being done. So.
And I believe they have 30 days after the settlement to make the report, or the last day of the following month. Is that correct?
Correct. Absolutely. But it's one of those things too, when we're teaching just straight title, thinking about the gap period and getting stuff recorded as soon as possible. If there is a hiccup, right? We're hoping there's not hiccups, but if there's a hiccup in the data collection, or you're missing something and the FinCEN filing system rejects it, the closer in time it is to closing, the better a chance you have of either getting the information or fixing it, right?
Right.
Uh,
So just plan to, as you're post closing, just
mhm.
plan on early is better, is more advantageous. And plus you're moving it off your desk. You can move on to the next file.
Right. Yeah. Because I used to do claims, and I always knew when I would get outside claims. I was outside claims counsel. I always knew when I would get more files, um, uh, based on the order of a file and how neat it was and how organized it was. Because the ones I got a lot of times were not. So when there's a good process, just go ahead and do it and get used to it. Um, doesn't mean you have to love it, but just as part of the process, because that's on the flip end. JJ, when I'm talking about we do this, yeah, we get information to transfer the taxes to the new buyer. We get information to pay transfer taxes or mortgage taxes in some situations and get it recorded. It's just part of that process in there. It's just a different entity, um, federal instead of your county or parish or wherever. Yeah.
So, Elizabeth, Angela, I guess, if if a settlement agent, I hope they are, if a settlement agent is listening right now, and they're still feeling overwhelmed, hopefully we've talked them off the ledge a little bit. That's the goal of this. We're not using the word freak out anymore because we're no longer freaking out.
Freaking out
Uh,
and
what is the single most important piece of advice? Like, what do you want to leave them with? Like, kind of from this conversation today, and I'll kind of just tee it up. I'd love to hear from each of you.
Sure. I want to leave them with that, collectively, we are in this together, that we're doing this for a great reason, that we're showing our relevancy as an industry. It's a business development opportunity. And if you have, lean on your trusted advisors. They are trusted advisors to their realtors and their loan officers. There are plenty of people in this industry, whether it's the underwriter, your bank, um, the vendors that are popping up, your title production software. Just lean on them early so that you have all of the information. Just prepare yourself. It's not going away.
Mm,
It is going to happen. So embrace it. It makes the change a lot easier if you embrace something.
acceptance. Yes.
Exactly.
yeah, and same thing. Um, you know, doing education at Fidelity, that's my whole job for our agency base. I have 5 videos that they can all access. One is just basically an overview talking about it, and then nuts and bolts, and then workflow. Take it one by one. You don't have to do everything. Rome was not built in a day, right? You don't have to do everything at once. Have the conversations, go to your LTAs. Alta did a boot camp on the subject. Talk with other folks in your county, in your state about this, um, because you can do it. And to Angela's point, yeah, lean on all of us. That's why we're here. I love talking with agents. I love my job. Ask us questions. And that's the biggest thing, because as this moves forward, yeah, the American Land Title Association and underwriters like FNF, we're still going to be advocating for change, maybe to make it narrower, figure things out. That's not ending. So, stick close with all of us. No one's on this alone. And it felt so good last week to be with 1,300 title professionals, and really collaborating and thinking about our industry. Because, yeah, Angela, you can't just waive us or get rid of us, because we're apparently really needed to help
Exactly.
gather data.
And
And I
speaking,
truly believe that.
I want to add one thing to what you said earlier. Just, Alta's advocacy at the federal and state level, they're invaluable in our industry, but we are stronger when we stand together. So I would like to encourage everyone to join the Title Action Network, or TAN, which is the American Land Title Association's grassroots network. that mobilizes title professionals across the country to help promote top issues on Capitol Hill and in state capitals. So it's free to join, and it's one of the best ways to have an impact. And even just regarding this rule, there were, over 1,000 letters sent out to members of Congress from TAN members. And the importance of TAN is that collectively, the more people that are part of TAN, it makes our voice louder. And so that's important.
Phenomenal.
Yeah. And I would just add on to that also, it's free. You don't have to be an Alta member. And for those settlement agents, if you are not a TAN member, it's literally they send you one email when it's time, when there's a campaign going on. So when we sent 1,000 letters to Congress talking about the need for a delay of FinCEN, it was 2 clicks, and it does it for you. 2 clicks. Think about how many clicks you have to do every single day. And that was the advocacy piece that really helped also to get this delay.
Exactly.
So join TAN. Yeah.
And
get your friends.
As far as a link, it's alta.org /advocacy/TAN. And you can join there. It's very, very simple.
alta.org /advocacy/TAN. Okay. Elizabeth, Angela, I know you guys have been making a little bit of a world tour lately. Talk to us a little bit about, who you've been talking to and I think what's been going on in both of your lives.
Sure. Elizabeth, do you want to start?
I mean, we were just together last week with 1,300 different people in New York City for the Alta One conference. And the major topic of conversation was FinCEN, and answering a lot of questions so that, maybe we don't have to freak out. But yeah, no, my whole job is literally traveling the country right now and prepping everyone and getting ready for what is going to be coming now, March 1st, 2026. So, Angela, where have I seen you recently?
Well, I've seen you in New York, Tennessee.
Yep.
That's within the last, 2 weeks?
Yes.
3, maybe? Yes. And I'm here in Maryland today and off back to Tennessee tomorrow and Vegas on Sunday for the Mortgage Bankers Association annual conference. So very busy, just like you. And it's been great in terms of being able to get out and talk to people. And I do want to say a thank you to FNF and Elizabeth and is in particular because FNF really worked with Alta, our advocacy arm, to delay this. And I think that that's just an example of grassroots and what we can do collectively as a whole. And so thank you for the delay. Certainly helps the timing. It allows for our agents to prepare for it.
One last thing, Elizabeth, quick plug maybe for Fidelity National Financial. Who are you all? Help us understand.
All right. So yeah, Fidelity National Finance, largest title underwriter in the world. Title insurance is in the United States. But yeah, we have a large independent agency base, and that's who I serve. We have approximately 4,500 independent agents that I get to help do education for. But yeah, pretty darn proud of Mike Nolan sitting on the stage last week as our CEO and talking about all of our advocacy efforts to help settlement agents and title agents and just the industry out there. But we are the largest title insurance underwriter out there. We have 5 different brands: Fidelity, Chicago Title, Commonwealth, Alamo, and Title Insurance of New York. I might have gotten the last one a little bit wrong, but yeah, we're out there doing the work, closing the deals, helping our independent agents to grow their business. So thank you, JJ, for that opportunity to give a shout out to my company.
Phenomenal. Well, truly, I will say you guys both went above and beyond today. Thank you. Angela Saiz, like Ibiza. I'm never going to forget that now. Elizabeth Berg, thank you so much for being on Pick Up. And we'll see you all next time.
All right. Thank you for having me, JJ. See you around, Angela.
JJ. Bye. Thanks, Elizabeth.